I'm Bob Clifford, President of the Chicago Bar Association. As we reflect on the 10th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on September 11th, we not only remember the victims and their families, we also reflect on whether our country is safer. What improvements have been made to national security? What are the needs and all the things that have been done in response? After the attacks, President George W. Bush established the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, also known as the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission was asked to prepare a complete accounting of the circumstances surrounding September 11th, review the aftermath of the attacks, and to make recommendations designed to guard against future attacks. We are fortunate to have a distinguished member of this commission as our guest. I am honored to introduce former Governor James R. Thompson. Governor Thompson served as Illinois' governor from 1977 to 1991, and to this day remains the longest-serving governor. He is the current senior chairman at the law firm of Winston Strawn here in Chicago. He has also served as a United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois and as an Assistant State's Attorney in Cook County. Thank you for joining me today, Governor Thompson.
My pleasure.
Governor, I almost feel that the introduction, not almost feel, I do feel that the introduction is incomplete. That I've had the privilege of knowing you, I think, my entire legal career. And when people ask me about you and what it means to have someone like you in Illinois, in Chicago, I tell them that he's one of the greatest Americans that I've had the privilege of getting to know.
Oh, my.
The fact is that you have served in so many positions of prominence in our community that have safeguarded justice, that have brought stability to when you were governor, to our economy, in an era when it seems that the candor is lost on politicians, and when rancor exists between Democrats and Republicans. You were someone who served as governor for the longest term during a Democratic legislature, and you got along and you got things done. That's quite an accomplishment for you.
Well, you know, it's if you go down to Springfield with the attitude that the people of Illinois elected you to do something, to solve problems, to meet challenges, to make the state a better place, to allow Illinois families to grow and prosper. And if you remember that while you might have been nominated by one political party, after you're elected, it's your constitutional obligation to represent all the people of Illinois, including the people who voted against you and including the people who didn't vote, not just your political supporters. And that was the attitude I took to Springfield, and I think that served me well. And the other thing you have to do as governor, I think, is to recognize that you're in charge of only one department of government. There's a legislature, there's a Supreme Court, which heads our judicial system, and they deserve your respect and cooperation as well. It's not a one-man band or a one-man show.
Right.
So that's how I ran things.
There you go. And you took that same attitude to Washington when you were appointed by the president to serve on the 9/11 Commission. I have so many questions about that process, but let me begin by saying when 9/11 occurred, I think every American was traumatized by the experience, right. And yet our president chose a bipartisan group of leaders. And you were known as being one of those folks who wasn't there just to go along. You asked some pretty probing questions and for some strong accountability from the president's inner circle, as I recall, Robert Clark. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Well, you know, if you look at the makeup of the commission, every one of the commission members had been active in politics. They were all, in a good sense, political partisans. But all of us, when we gathered in Washington for the first time, under the leadership of Governor Kane and Lee Hamilton, our Republican and Democratic chair and vice chair, all of us insisted that in this mission, the 9/11 Commission, to deal with the greatest tragedy that had been visited upon our nation in our history, that we would not act in a partisan manner. And we didn't. And at the end, the proof was clear. We issued a report that did not have a single dissenting vote, did not have a single dissenting footnote. We had the obligation to examine 2 presidents of the United States and 2 vice presidents of the United States, President Bush and President Clinton. We questioned them for hours, and their vice presidents as well, along with members of the cabinet, members of the military, members of Congress. And we refused to let our political instincts become a part of that process. And we also said, this is not going to be a report which is printed and then put on the shelf to gather dust. This is going to be a living document. This report needs to point the way to greater security for the United States and its people. And I think we were true to that. It was also, I think, well received by the public. Over 10 million copies were printed or downloaded. I saw people reading it in airports. It was summer beach reading. It was a fascinating story, and we went deep. We not only conducted hundreds of interviews in the United States, but all across the world as well. In Iraq, in Pakistan, and at every imaginable place across the globe. And I think we got the story right. And I think our recommendations, which have now largely been followed, were right on the money. And to get to a question I know you're going to ask, yes, I think the United States is safer today. We're not safe. We'll never be safe, but we are safer. And I guess the proof of that, or maybe it's a combination of hard work and effort and the investment of billions of dollars and citizen awareness and just plain luck.
Right.
With the exception of the underwear bomber on the flight to Detroit a couple of Christmases ago and the guy who tried to blow up a truck in Times Square, the United States has not suffered that kind of attack as we did on 9/11.
Yeah, well, you had Fort Hood.
Well, Fort Hood, yes, but Fort Hood was a man who was a regular member of the military, right, who later turned out was under the control of this radical imam from Yemen, but in armed forces of several 100,000 people, you would never be able to spot a deranged, right, controlled personality. But in terms of plots involving explosives and things of that sort, attempts to destroy institutions like an office building or an airport or a dock or a highway or a pipeline, no.
Yeah. You know, context is so important, and life just has a way of calling people to service who are ideally suited. The one thing that is noteworthy in your involvement in the commission is your experience as a prosecutor. You've been a prosecutor. What folks forget, you're known for Governor Thompson, he calls you Governor, but you were one of the nation's leading prosecutors for a good portion of your career. Did those skills as a prosecutor aid you in getting to the bottom, and the commission getting to the bottom of the failures that you identified in the report?
Well, I think they did. I think having served as a prosecutor gives you a skill set to understand law enforcement, to understand how agents, whether they're agents of the FBI or the New York police or ATF agents, how they work, how they operate, how they think, how they investigate. It teaches you the difference between a good investigation and a bad investigation. It teaches you how to view people's testimony and stories, whether with credibility or cynicism. So I think that was very valuable. And in fact, there were two prosecutors on the commission, and one of them was my former student, Richard Benvenisti, who was a graduate student of mine at Northwestern University and is now a first-rate litigator at Mayor Brown in Washington. He was a secondary Watergate prosecutor. Okay. And so he brought those same sort of skill sets to the commission that I did, and we were reunited after all these years when I was teaching him at Northwestern.
There you go. You know, one thing that I can't help but think about, Gov, in my legal career, I had the privilege of serving as the liaison counsel on all the property damage claims in New York, the losses for 9/11. But out of that experience, I frankly became a bit cynical, if you will, about the fact that security at that time at the airports was in the hands, if you will, of the airlines, A, and then B, that the airlines did, at least the rumor was, they did their best to lobby the commission to stay away from things they didn't like. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. Nobody ever successfully lobbied the commission to do or not do something, including the President of the United States. Okay. We had our relationships with the White House, and oftentimes I was delegated, or Fred Fielding, who was a former White House counsel, was delegated to go talk to the White House and the general counsel for the president and the national security advisor for the president, and lay it on the line with them. And they became a lot more forthcoming after one of those visits. And in the end, President Bush was one of the best witnesses before our commission. I was quite taken with his testimony. It was in the White House. The whole commission was there, and he testified for hours. And it was an interesting thing to see and hear. And all of us, Republican and Democratic alike, we're very proud of his testimony. And we said so when we came out of the White House. We said, hey, 5 stars. But you know, you don't accept a position on a commission like this and leave yourself open to lobbying or pressure or anything. First of all of us had been around for so long. We had nothing to gain. We weren't looking for anything. We were serving our country. We knew, as one of our commission members said, we had the weight of history on our shoulders. Right. And there was going to be no way to impact our conclusions except by testimony. Right. And so, no, that didn't work.
Okay. You know, in following the very thing that I'm talking about in terms of controlling security, we now have a little thing called the TSA.
Yes.
And there's so much talk of late about the new body scanners and things like that. And did the commission discuss civil liberties and civil rights versus safety, and where Americans and we as citizens need to kind of compromise what our sense of privacy is versus the good of all?
Absolutely.